Hello, my name is Joseph Christos Thrice. My birth name is Joe Stanley, and this is part two of a video series exposing all evil, conspiracy, and corruption, freeing prisoners of the world that we live in, and setting our mind, body, and soul free, hopefully leading to a flood of love and light, and having people not hide their purity, hiding their real thoughts, their freedom of expression, their freedom of speech. And in the first part, I went over some of the outlining of how we ping pong people's minds who are outsiders, and a little bit of how the insiders work, and the ruling classes, and the powers that be, and the secret societies that are right alongside them, as guards, guardians, and a world of angels and demons, and balancing the cosmos, a fight of good and evil. Might sound cliche. A lot of these ancient teachings or these themes, they might seem outdated, or they might seem like they're not in our world, and that they're things just in movies, but very much it is how we have lived in humanity and civilization since the beginning. And I'm, hoping to cut the knot off, or cut the Gordian knot off, and hopefully we can start as new. So I went into some of the darker aspects of torture, of rituals that, once again, we think these things don't exist, but they are very prevalent, and they are more prevalent than ever, and people lose their lives. And, I want to shed a light on that so that there's no more torture and killing, or if it is in the light of day, and so we don't have to hide in the night. Once again, a metaphor, but hope you can get what I'm, kind of saying. So I'm going to go, once again, seeing is believing, the things that are in this world. And I hope with this video series, these things will be more apparent to people. We can return to self-evident truths and have more organic conversation without fighting this psychological war and this spiritual war, and hopefully unifying all religions, all spirituality, all philosophies, all paths of life, and basically, in this age of information, utilizing it the way it should be. And with doing that, we can return to something a little more pure. As I said, we do live in a world of duality, but it shouldn't be 50% good, 50% evil. And I believe, the balance is way off. I'm programmed to be kind of a analytic kind of person, and I would say we could be 75% in the dark and 25% in the light. And I think a lot of people are in denial about this, but I feel like I see an accurate portrayal of it. There's an artificial layer, a plastic layer of the world, and within that we can hide politics, and make it seem like we're doing positive stuff when we're binding us to something in the physical world that we shouldn't be a part of, and all these psychological operations, and how the military and government, and the ruling class and these secret societies have their hand in everything. And they have us, fighting wars. They have us doing all these insane things, and going to more and more extremes. And in the 80s and 90s, a lot of stuff was kind of getting free and all that. That's after the civil rights. And I mentioned in my last one, like, rock music is gone from the mainstream now, and they now kind of coin it as butt rock. As odd as that sounds, and replace it with hip hop, and how the pop is always kind of like that artificial layer. But there are subconscious and subliminal themes, and a lot of these songs are trying to speak what they cannot speak with their freedom of speech or freedom of expression. So we kind of have to hide in this underground. We have to hide in this world where we can't really say what we really mean. We have to use metaphors and concepts and all these different things, and a lot of people get lost, and a lot of people, because of it, are tortured and killed. And as I said in the last video, we are hunting people. We're using thousands of people as guinea pigs, everyone on the grid within the matrix. Their mind can be hacked, their body can be hacked. We're now like computers, we're having human hybrids. There is 100% a hive mind, there is 100% synthetic telepathy. And I will say that from the beginning. People have guarded these secrets, both forbidden knowledge and divine knowledge, and the divine knowledge has not been able to thrive as it should, and thus evil has its place. And like I said before, we think that the medieval times are raping and pillaging in villages, like that's all gone, and it's more prevalent than ever. It is just better hidden than ever. And so, like I said, in the 80s and 90s, we kind of had like this stuff in the culture with rock and new metal, which would be NU metal, a lot of that rap rock. And there was a lot of anger in that music, and they had gangster rap in the 90s, and that still is kind of lingering around. But it's definitely a different vibe, you know what I mean? But it's so like 2000s, we changed that a little bit, and then we keep cleaning and we keep throwing out the trash, which no one is trash, no subject is trash, everything should be welcome, everything belongs. So I'm going to get into some of the specifics of the technology, and then get into movies and TV in Hollywood and those rituals and how they tie to the secret societies and these initiations and human sacrificing, which once again has never stopped. And for some reason, all of these people in secret societies have been letting this happen. And I want to return to what this country should have been when it was founded, what this world should have been when people had this divine knowledge, and so much has been so far from the mark. So I'll leave it at least I'll leave it at that, and hopefully we can see that Atlantis is real. Syncretionism. There we go. Gets caught on my tongue because of all the stuff I've been through, but it goes into the mind control and all that kind of stuff, literally prevalent in just what was happening, word that I can say all the time, and it's from biohacking and all that stuff. I know that's hard to believe for people, but very much the truth. So we'll start kind of at the beginning, of more the modern era. But, like I said, we, for 2,000 years, use religion as a way to control people. And as you can see, for 2,000 years, we use Christ as a symbol for something opposite of what it was. Jesus Christ was the light of God, right? The Son of God, which can, you can be use that as a metaphor as like the actual sun, and that kind of ties into some occult metaphors. And like I said, this language is very intended, but only understood by initiated or similar, so you had the light of God, and this is reflected in all religious and spiritual paths. But in Christianity and in the Western world, it kind of took over, Romans, Holy Roman Empire, all this other stuff. Everything that came before it, all the pagan kind of stuff, all the occult teaching, the spiritual teachings, everything happened in India and China and in the Eastern world. Like I said, they all derive, the tree of life as a symbol, and many other things. And so I hope, with this information, people start digging into how we have always been united, but we've always been divided on certain values, and we all want the same thing. You know what I mean? But yeah, so we'll go from there, and hopefully you guys will understand as we go along. I'm just kind of gonna go as quick as I can, and not kind of delve into stuff, but say certain terms that I think you should look into. So 2,000 years we had religion controlling people, and obviously another part was just like these empires, and empires would come and go, and yet all this kind of stuff was still going on. You could say that Britain was an empire and they took over the world, and then kind of America kind of took over, and they're like the new empire, and they pretty much were the ones to succeed at world order, world control, world police. And as an American myself, I'm kind of disgusted by a lot of the things that have been done, even since the inception of the country. And the four founders of this country were Masons, which, if they had all this knowledge, you got to question why. Why did it go strictly to Christian values and all this, other stuff that went along with it? And so basically, um, you got to ask yourself that. Along with that, the Masons, 100 years before the black people, African Americans, they were freed from slavery. They had their first Masonic lodge that accepted black people, and I do think this was kind of an underground way that took about over 100 years to accomplish. And then you had Abraham Lincoln freeing the slaves. So it just kind of goes to show how this cosmic balance and this fight of good and evil can stop stuff like that. You know what I mean? And I will highlight, one of the things that, for some reason, when I was a teenager, like, I always felt it. And, I questioned, why do people work? And, I've seen things that, who knows, and this is from AI or Google searches, where it's like, back in, say, medieval times, people would only work during the harvest season and not work the rest of the year, only work 150 days of the year, 250 days of the year. And once again, this is the writers and authors of the world. So you don't know what's true, what's not true, and you don't know, why we succumb to this economy and the gold and all this just madness around having riches and power and status and all that. And I hope that we can start to steer away from that. I know people, in the future now are kind of talking about, eventually people won't have to work and all, and so, like, what's going to happen, then you have all this hive mind and technology and digital world that we live in. And like I said in the last video, there are things that we can't change, or maybe we can change everything. But there are some things that we can change, and once things come to light, I'm hoping that people will get behind what is right and what is light, pure light, raw love, and try not to have these wars. So more in modern time, or I guess before I go into that, I'll say, we're living, I'm just going to go a little bit from the United States and stuff like that. In the United States, annually, there is 100,000 people missing, 600,000 missing short term that, usually, are found at some point. There's 100,000 people who are committing suicide, and 100,000 who are committing homicide every year in the U.S. And that doesn't go into the mass shootings, and that goes directly into the experimental torture and the guinea pig experiments and these death rituals and these human sacrifices. And as I mentioned in the last video, they have a Jesus Christ ritual and a scapegoat ritual, because we don't want to take accountability for the world that we live in and the lives that we live in denial and all this evil that is thriving, that we won't say anything, or we want to just live a simple life. And so we accept so many things that don't make sense. And to add to that, 3 million people in the U.S. annually die. And of course, most people will be like, yeah, lots of people die all the time. You know what I mean? And that is a natural part of life. But yeah, before I go a little into that, there was stats where I said 100,000 of homicides and suicides. I had done that maybe 2 months ago, 3 months ago, something like that. And basically, next time I went to go search specifics and, analytical data, those stats were changed. And this is from the AI or the chat, GPT, stuff like that, or Google or any of that kind of stuff. Anything on the internet for, you know, basic information. And the homicides were put down to 20,000, and the suicides were put down to 50,000. And so, you can look at this and then say, the thing with the black crime that's been portrayed by the FBI stats, that's basically saying black people commit twice as much as the population of black people. And so, obviously, those stats are juked in some way. You know what I mean? As far as the control that the government has and all that, it's hard to say what's really going on. And just like I said with the homicide, how did I see that it was 100,000, and then I go back and I check and it's saying numbers like 20,000 a year. I do believe that's the government cleaning up, getting rid of the trash, and once again, it's not trash, it is the truth. You know what I mean? So once again, you say, what is the truth? How do we find it? And the first step in doing that is saying that all these people who run these technology companies, the private sector, the fact that and once again, another stat, that the military is the largest part of our economy, and we sell, I think 60% of all the world's arms and defense and all that kind of stuff comes from the U.S. And so we have a control on that. And like I said, it's like you look at one thing that says like the military or war is like 2/3 of the economy, and then I go back and then it's saying 3%. So obviously that was talking strictly about military and war. Doesn't get into the defense contractors, the arms dealers of all different types of weapons, all this technology, all this hive mind stuff, and all the warfare that comes with that, and the science that goes into that. So like that's kind of how they hide and juke the stats. And someone like me, who is spied on 100% of the time, 24/7. Not like everyone isn't, who isn't on the grid, but someone like me, they use me to better clean up all the evil things they're doing and all these stats that they make and all this information, being in the information age where so much is now finally seeing the light of day. So I just want to shed a light on that and just be like, people aren't allowed to think, organically about this stuff and question why. You know what I mean? They say curiosity killed the cat. The second part of that is not, once again, how they used to update in analog times. The saying was originally curiosity killed the cat, but satisfaction brought it back. And now it's just curiosity killed the cat. And once again, I mentioned this in the first part of the video. This is how we use language to, control the language and the culture, and thus how the mainstream works and how the zeitgeist of information works. And I referenced, cats and dogs. It's raining like cats and dogs, and how dogs could be seen as red or Republican, and cats could be seen as liberal or Democrat, and this cat thing can go back to the Egyptian stuff. So it's all tied in together, and I'm not really going to speculate any more than that. I'm not here to talk about politics, just the fact that everything has been made political. And if you look at all the political channels, like I honestly can't really watch any of that stuff because it is so divisive and so subversive. And so since World War II, we basically we've traded in war, in this physical war, though America is in over 80 countries as we speak, and there's tons of, wars with, Israel and Palestine and Russia and Ukraine and all this other stuff going on. But yeah, for the most part, we've traded, like I said, we've trying to clean up what we do and how we do it, even though the same amount of evil, if not more evil, is happening now, and everyone's in more chains than ever. And though we go through these initiations and rituals, or a lot of people do, or more people know now, and there's insiders, and there's a lot more freedom in that kind of way, they are still kind of cloaked in this plastic artificial layer, not allowed to say what they're really wanting to say. And as far as the politics, they have to stay with the narrative. Thus, once again, like the Matrix is controlling everything, and we're, more prisoners than ever. And then there are actual prisoners, and then there are actual people like me who are being hunted, um, and hit with all types of weapons, direct energy weapons, sonic weapons, microwave weapons. And like I said in the other video, sorry if I keep saying that, bodies can be hijacked, bioengineering, so your genetic makeup, your DNA, the chemistry in your body can be hijacked. Your mind can be hijacked. Your mind can be connected to other people's thoughts. Thoughts are read. Telepathy. All of this stuff is in databases. You know what I mean? Um, so getting off topic a little bit, but so in modern day, we have in around the 1800s, we had Pavlovian conditioning, so, also known as classical conditioning. They kind of interchange with each other. And that was, once again, it was something they did with dogs to train them. And it was basically the basic concept, if you don't know, is basically you would do some type of action or something, you ring a bell and then associate it with a negative or positive connotation to the dog. And a lot of people are still using that now as propaganda to train people. And I'm going to get into that, how we are kind of training, super soldiers or spies, or these weapons, or people who are turned into neural weapons like myself. And that goes into the whole scapegoat ritual as well, because you have me kind of saying all this stuff and creating chaos in my mind that connects to the people that are in the hive mind or attached to these psychological operations. But basically, like I said, this was the beginning of the science part of how we condition people. We've always, had stuff to condition people, and I'm sure it was always known since ancient times, but as we gave it coined terms for it, and actually made it a study, you know, um, this was like the first kind of official kind of thing. And like I said in the other video, um, we use to mask what we're doing to humans with, whether it be like research clinical trials on mice, cats, dogs. Russia put in the 80s or 90s, put cameras into cats' heads implanted, and then they were able to see what the cat was seeing. And that was kind of like the first of how we could get people's vision to come up on a screen. And now we have the digital age. So what you're seeing on this screen, someone could be seeing through my perspective, first perspective, as clear as day. You know what I mean? And that's 100% real. And like I said, like if you can read between the lines, and if you are trained in any type of way, like I said, mainly from TV, but anything with signal, um, it does train your mind, and you hear differently. And I went into, if like this metaphor of being married, and you have a ring when you're married, and you have a ringing in your ears. All these things start to make sense, and they start to converge together, and then you see the world and experience it in a different way, and you have an understanding of a lot of different concepts just by reading one concept. And of course, we have, like I said, what these people have done with secret societies or any of that kind of occult spiritual teachings. The beauty of it, the beauty of Atlantis, is that we have made a collective consciousness, and that's based in our history and culture. So all these things that we have for catchphrases or stuff we have growing up, that's kind of embedded in us. And there was an analog version of it, obviously, but now with the digital age, everything's converging. So maybe a reason why a lot of things are so divided now, because people have all this information and all this other stuff, and there's so much more to be angry about. And I can tell you, I'm one of those angry people. And I look at anger as a gift. You know what I mean? And I also, I have rage, for what this machine, Big Brother, the all-seeing eye, whatever you want to call it, the powers that be. There's so many names, right? But like I said, it all converges together, and you start to see. So even though there's so many people who are good people, they're decent people, a lot of them are doing evil things. So now they're not so good. Now they're not so decent. And we have more demons in this world than angels, or however you want to look at it. I'm not going to, put my thoughts or beliefs onto you. But like I said, it does definitely seems like there's more evil in the world. And the people that should be good are compromised, we'll say. I guess we'll look at it at that. You know what I mean? Um, but so, we went to that. And, in the 1900s, I spoke a little about this before. There was a guy named Harry Laughlin, and I'm pretty sure he was based in America. But, he started eugenics. And we like to think Nazis did the eugenics, and it's like everyone all over the world was doing that. And you look to China and Russia and U.S. as superpowers, and of course people in Europe. But like I said, like America got like 1,200 Nazis after World War II, scientists and all different types of workers, and same with Russia. And they seem to be the ones that, do the most with the mind control and have the biggest portion in it. And how that goes into NASA and the space race, which was really space exploration of 3D space, which how we got to the place of four-dimensional thinking, exploring the space in our brains and how that connects to the 3D world, thus 4D, four dimensions. And there's many more dimensions. And as far as like the training and the torture and the ritual abuse and the ritual stuff that I've been through, I don't really know like what dimension I've experienced, but once again, you know, um, I'm sure lots of people have experienced this, and they hide it, and then they get through it, and then it's just part of the world to them. But yeah, I would also like to add, like, mental illness, people with mental illness, whether it be more serious stuff like schizophrenia or psychosis, or just, basic stuff like severe depression or anxiety or, repeating, depression that comes in their lives. A lot of these people have a window to seeing the world differently and seeing these different dimensions and how the spiritual world, your thoughts, and your spirit, connect to the physical world. Which is why people like myself, which I only had anxiety and stuff like that, but I saw the world differently. So with that combined, that's how it gets on all this crazy stuff. But basically, the mentally ill people have this window into this world to see differently. You can go into autistic people as well. I mean, they see the world differently, and that, they see this stuff, and the world says, no, you're wrong, you must be crazy. And it's like, maybe everyone's just going with the flow, maybe everyone's just ignoring it and in denial. But these people, they see things differently, and it's not because they see things differently, but they're told they're wrong, so then they get even crazier. And like I said, this makes them ripe for evil people, Nazi scientist origins, and even before, that basically, let's try and see what they can endure and what they experience when they're put through extremes of torture, and you put them, you give them this kind of forced Kundalini awakening, like I had. That's the best way to put it. And you look at the CIA, they have tons of research on the occult and all this other kind of stuff. Um, but yeah, it gets pretty crazy pretty quick. But yeah, I'd like to say, once again, you take care of the tired, the poor, the hungry. You also take care of the mentally ill, and if we fucking, sorry, excuse me, I'm trying not to swear too much to them. If we respected the mentally ill and saw what gifts they have and how they can see and how they have vision, and if we looked at normal people that way, and I don't like to say normal, but, your general public will say, um, they have so many things to give this world, but they are, kept inside their spirit, and so many people are misunderstood on top of that. So moving on to more of how this grid was created and how science has been hiding the truth and how it still hides the truth a lot. And even though people have a lot of knowledge, they're not allowed to share it, which I'm sharing as much as I can. 1873, it was theorized the existence of electromagnetic waves, and If you look at it through a spiritual lens, it would be what some have said key lines, ley lines that are around the globe that have spiritual energy, or you could just put supernatural energy, which was just natural energy. And it goes back to how I'm talking about gatekeepers. I can't say if this information is true, but I do believe that with the electromagnetic spectrum, which is also how they use a lot of these remote weapons, um, I do think there is something about it with energy and how certain parts on the globe have different reactions with energy or they do different things, you know. And if you look into the research of quantum physics and different parts of the world, or you know, just basic kind of stuff on the terrain of the world, or you know, like how water behaves in certain places, or you know, things like that. Um, but yeah, so with that, that was kind of like the basis for how they started to understand how signals work. And in 1887, Hertz created radio waves, and frequency is calculated in hertz, basically sound. And so Tesla was saying, I don't remember what the exact quote is. I can only have so much information in my brain, but to understand the world, see it through vibration, energy, and frequency, I believe. And so all these things are connected, and that is a very accurate statement. Um, but so with all that information, just from that alone, that's kind of how we started calculating how we could put signals into people's heads, how people reacted with vibration, how people reacted to sound, how they reacted with energy, how they reacted with nature, and how did nature react with human beings, and how the universe reacts to everything. And you know, you can go to the moon and how the tides occur, or any of these things that you know a lot of people shrug off, and it's like there's so much wonder in it, and there's so much knowledge to be had, and so much of it's hidden. And to know that it's used to create these hive minds, which could be a beautiful thing or not, but once again, we kill and torture people who don't make it through these rituals, or who find out this knowledge and then don't use it the way that people say they want to. And that's why I found myself with so much torture, so much attacks from, you know, like my whole town was turned into a psychological operation. Everything in the city near where I live, and you know, all these people, you know, might as well say, you know, like MIT, Harvard, all these colleges, you know, and how they're connected to the hospitals and how they're connected to the mental hospitals. I've had psychological operations done to me in mental hospitals where the staff was in on it. The half the patients weren't real. Just truly disgusting, truly purely evil stuff, you know. And like I said, like a lot of these people say, "Oh, I'm just a normal person, and you know, I'm a decent person," and it's like it's hard to gauge now what is good and what is evil, and the government is not helping that whatsoever, and everyone who's puppeted to do this stuff begins to muddy the waters. So these signals basically gave birth to TV. To radio. 1920 was the first radio stations, and eventually, you know, got to millions of people, obviously. But this was the first time people were programmed together in real time. So you don't want to think about this. You don't want to think about this kind of stuff. But like I said, think about that statement, programmed together in real time. So there's a signal going out, and along that signal, there is subconscious information, which, unless you are tapped or wired or jacked into this matrix, or, you know, with another signal underneath it, or however it works, you know, people are basically programmed to go with whatever is going on. Thus, you know, you don't want to be going with how you want to go with how everyone else is thinking. You don't want to think outside the box. And though we still, excuse me, though we are still, you know, saying, oh, you can be whatever you want, you can think whatever you want, whatever you think is possible, the impossible is possible, which is something I believe, which is why I do this, to make the impossible possible again. They say, you know, like on one of those other things, they say anybody can become the president. Well, I don't think that's quite true. You know what I mean? Um, and there's a lot of other truths where it's like maybe you can't do all the things that they tell you can do when you're a kid, or even when you're an adult. And when you're adult, you're just accepting it. You know what I mean? Like I said, with the economy. Um, so yeah, around the same time, and up to the 1940s, first television stations were going, and that's when all this kind of was starting to go on. And First World War was 1917. End of World War II was 44, 45. And as I said and before, they remapped the whole world after World War One. They remapped the world after World War Two, and secret societies and people all over the world were all part of this kind of loosely. And as time went on, more people were part of it, and thus more people were united in protecting this and killing anybody that got in their way or was trying to expose anything until it was the right time. The right time is always now. You know what I mean? Why do we wait? Why do we listen to these people? Why do we listen to gatekeepers? This is the things that we need to start breaking the taboo of. And I want to break the taboo. So around the same time, we had in 1947, right after World War II, we had the birth of the military industrial complex, which began really starting to do what I can only speculate as what I see as brute force and fascism. You know what I mean? Making the public and people nationally do everything that the government wants, or whatever. And the military controls this, and the government agencies. And after that time, we got more and more government agencies. And you got to ask ourselves. We have the CIA and FBI. Why do we have National Security Agency? Why do we have the Homeland? You know, all these additional agencies and so many things that we don't need. I mean, the government just keeps expanding with this, and that was so that they could have more control, more data, more things at their disposal. You know what I mean? And like I said, now we have the surveillance state, this kind of Nazi-esque surveillance state of citizens, turning people into spies or soldiers. Um, like I said, for fun fact for anybody who doesn't know, or is it the intranet? The internet was created by the military, and now you know yeah, I'll wait to get into some of the other stuff. But basically, that was kind of they know, they say, oh, we never knew what the internet was going to be capable of or any of that, and it's like I'm pretty sure that they knew exactly what they were doing. And as I said, with TV and radio signals, I'm pretty sure that they were doing that almost at the same time it was, given to the masses. Like I said, by the time radio had gone to millions, um, you know what I mean? I think these signals were starting to go out, and these subconscious signals, and all these, uh, the power of sound and in frequency, and how we can fine tune. Just for instance, the human voice is at about 3,000 hertz, kilohertz, or yeah, so 3,000 hertz. And so by tapping into that, and then the brain waves, which are I think anywhere from 2 hertz to maybe 14 hertz, something roughly like that. So just that alone, we can see what the thoughts are at, and they have alpha waves, delta waves, theta waves, and stuff like that. Once again, going back to how we put culture in, that's Greek references again. Um, but so where was I going with that? Yeah, so we have signals, and they interact with our brain in different ways, and our brain has frequencies, and our brain has electricity, and our heart has electricity, and it's going throughout our body. Our body has tons of energy, and as I said with chakras before, as an example, these are light or energy sources or points in our bodies. And you have the pineal gland, the third eye, the all-seeing eye. Once again, this is how the information is kind of delved into intended language. but that is what the intended language is. And so, um, just as a more modern thing before I go back into this, or I guess we can go into more of the modern day kind of things. Um, well, before I say that, NATO and the UN, which were controlled and kind of created by, Britain and a few places in Europe, but mainly the United States, once again, trying to be the first ones to succeed at, world control and a world order. And there was always kind of a little bit of it. And, this is just me putting some thoughts out there, not even a theory, but it's like, what if the Nazis were created? What if all this Jewish hate and this anti Semitism was created? And, once again, it goes back into these wars for balance and all this other kind of stuff about values. But it's like, it's hard to know what the real, why did Hitler do what he did? Why did he think that the white race was superior? Was he made or programmed to be this hateful person? Was he made to be the bad guy or the heel in the situation? That's how we do politics right now. We have the baby face and we have the heel, which is a pro wrestling analogy, but very much that's how they control these psychops for politics and the culture. They make good guys and bad guys, right? Which once again goes into the balance of good and evil. But yeah, so that was right after World War II, along with all the government agencies and all these other countries in Europe and all over the world. They were all doing the same thing. You know what I mean? Um, can't speak as much on South America and Africa, but I'm sure you had the East Indian Company. I think that's the name of that had was under British control, and most of the South America is controlled by either United States, Britain, or France. There may be a couple other countries, and there are obviously exceptions, but isn't and then you go to the other side to the Philippines and stuff like that. Even these countries that have no ties kind of directly, they have a relationship behind the scenes. And you go beneath Florida to I forget what that is, the Caribbean or whatnot, about Cuba, Puerto Rico, all this stuff, which once again, Cuba had ties with Russia, and they had missiles there, which was its own crisis and conflict. But yeah, all of that, I forget which one, but it's like they had U.S. currency. They had no ties to U.S., but they used U.S. currency. So it just shows how this stuff is connected, basically. So go a little bit more to modern day, or real current stuff. It was literally, I think, just last month, officially in court or whatever it was. There was the secret surveillance program, FISA 702, FISA 702, stated officially everyone is watched. And they stated this officially. And once again, it's like, how is that not the news story? And you know what I mean? Not saying that right now the immigration situation isn't horrible and that some horrible things are happening. But once again, you learn about psychops and you see how we're deflected from things that matter. And once again, you talk about why is no one talking about changing the economy, or that there's a monopoly that's ran TV, that ran radio, that runs the internet, these streaming platforms. And no matter how things go, there's always these gatekeepers and this control. You know, huge problem as far as I'm concerned. I think millions would agree, billions would agree. But so going into mind control, there were programs MK Ultra, which a lot of people know, started knowing around my generation, and COINTELPRO, which was also in Europe, I believe. And there were many types of programs. Like I said, Russia and US were like the main ones, and they're like the countries where you see mass shootings. So that's how like it's an indicator that yeah, we are torturing people until they go crazy and go kill people or commit suicide, whatever the case may be. Just a little bit about some other technology. Like I said, they use the electromagnetic spectrum to create these weapons, and so I'll get into some of the technology. Smart dust is something, once again, it's dust that gets into your body, can do all sorts of things. And nanobots, these are things that deal with the biology of the body, and they can do a lot of good and they can do a lot of bad. And like I said, it connects to this whole thing where, like I said, the chakras were turned into healing and regenerative, given healing and regenerative properties, like I've experienced myself. And basically, these kind of things with electricity or with these signals, that's how we're kind of slowly reaching immortality. um, I'm gonna butcher this guy's name maybe, but this guy named Michio Kushi, and in 1984 he gave a speech that you can probably find, called "The Rise of the New Human Race," and it delves into, by the 80s, how we became a bio nation, in 2000 how we became a psych nation, and how we were basically converting humans to analog to digital. And it goes into macrobiotics, universal consciousness, and planetary commonwealth. And these all sound like great things, but once again, you talk about the oppressors of the world, the ruling class, and how everyone's been puppeted to do all this evil stuff. And you wonder where the balance is. And you wonder if evil is not thriving, if the bad guys won, and now we're just kind of living in that world trying to make it as good as we can. You know what I mean? So some of this other technology, you can look into. There's Range R, Xavier cell site simulation technology. There's Stingray technology, which helps locate and identify cell phones, um, and wireless devices, and mimics cell phone towers, tricking phones and people into connecting to it, collecting all types of data. You know, can give voice analysis, and basically any other kind of things. And we talk about our phone, internet. I'm pretty sure they can recreate anybody's voice at this point, and as we've seen it with AI and stuff like that, they're able to do that. And just a couple of years ago, when I looked at it, it's like it sounded pretty good. It was basically to the point where it sounded like somebody was reading, but at the same time had a couple artifacts that weren't quite fully human yet. And now, fast forward, I'm going to guess we're there. We can have AI recreate videos that look pretty real and you see pretty crazy stuff. Um, but yeah, so some of this other technology, that I had mentioned before, it can pick up, and before I say it, there's also infrared and thermal readers, and there's sensors for all these kind of things. And as we know, like, you can talk about something with your car has hundreds of sensors, you know what I mean? So all these things are there for a reason. But these devices that I mentioned before, they can pick up your breathing, they can pick up chemical changes in your body, and you're kind of like always looking at everybody, and if that doesn't scare the hell out of you, I don't know what to tell you. You know what I mean? You can embrace a brave new world, but at the same time, don't we want to stop some of these things? Some things are kind of pervasive. You go into Edward Snowden, and once again to psychops. I believe personally, that was a psychological operation to get it into the zeitgeist, the general public of knowledge, so that way, 5 years later, literally only 5 years later, every corporation, every company can now ask you for your private information. And just by entering a website, they get every credit card you have, any kind of card, your insurance, your phone, your number, what you like and don't like, and then connects to your Facebook, and then pretty much everything about your life. And we just let this happen. And I would like to have my privacy back. I'm sure a lot of people would, but once again, people are just like, oh, that's how it is. And that's such a grooming tool that is so prevalent and has always worked, and it's really sad. I hate to observe that people aren't questioning that kind of stuff or trying to stop that stuff, and we're just like, oh, privacy's gone. And then this kind of information I'm talking about, I don't want it to be coming to the point where it's like, oh, we're in a hive mind, they can read our thoughts. It's like we should be fighting back. You know what I mean? You don't have consent to have my thoughts, and you don't have consent to control my body or, my information, or to put me on a path. I want to be in charge of my destiny, my life, and I know everybody else does too. You know what I mean? So we put that again, with the surveillance state of cameras and all these sensors. We're basically making a prison. And I think we've pretty much succeeded at making the world a prison. And you think that's a lot of doom and gloom? Totally understand. But at the same time, it goes back to that thing where they say, oh, if you have nothing to hide, then what are you worried about? Well, I'm going to tell you right now, even if you don't have anything to hide, you shouldn't be offering that. And you should have the integrity and, the care for yourself to not want people to have that, and to not, be able to get more data, and so they can better control people. They're saying it more so you can customize everything, and everything's catered to you, everything's for you, even though you are the product. So, once again, there are things that people want to happen, and, they're brainwashed to think it for a certain reason, and others know what's going on for real, and they just go along with it because if they, once again, expose stuff, they are afraid of reprisal or torture or death, really real thing. And, people used to die for freedom. People used to die for things all the time that they believed in. And I'm, I've gone through hell, and I'm lucky to be alive to give you this information. I really am. I can't even go into the hundreds of chemical agents, allergies, and pathogens I've been put through, viruses and bacteria and germicides that I've been exposed to, the direct energy and the microwaves and all that from, just watching TV. I haven't used my computer in 3 years. I haven't been able to really use my phone or really do anything with technology for a couple of years, and that's when I started experiencing this extreme stuff where people were spending millions of dollars trying to kill me, yet at the same time had military orders to keep me alive. And once again, you go to psych ops and these wars in the information wars and all this kind of stuff, and there are a lot of people that want me to say this information, and that's one of the reasons why I'm alive. I'm alive. So I do thank those people. I know there are good people and decent people. I don't want to paint a doom and gloom picture. Um, but just adding a little bit more, 1980s is when we kind of went digital, had all these, for instance, like musical instruments that went digital and all this other stuff, and the rise of the computers. The 2000s, that's when the information age kind of started. 2012, 2016, that's when all this stuff was starting to really push forward. And like I said, like so much, it increased exponentially on how many people knew what I know now, and how many people were part of these societies, and working basically for the military or government. And Hollywood was kind of compromised probably since the beginning. And to say that the majority of the writers, directors, everybody involved, the actors, um, they're all kind of puppets for this kind of thing. And they are entertaining us. They are um, giving us something to love and enjoy and to be inspired by. But once again, are we able to dream? Are we allowed to dream? Or is it just there so we believe we can dream until we try to manifest our dreams, and then you're faced with what I've been faced with, which is just complete horror. um but yeah, 2001 had the Patriot Act, and that's also right after 9/11, which I'm not gonna touch whatever the situation was. All I know is that they did have knowledge prior that if someone was going to attack, it was going to be on the World Trade Center. It happened in 93. And so that led for all this stuff to kind of be happening. Um, but yeah, so basically with after 9/11, it kind of had all these drills that were being done, and it was stopped. I don't know why 9/11 happened, or all the things going on in the Middle East. Um, but yeah, so that's when all these drills, and also the Espionage Act came into being. And so once again, these things escalate. So I'm just giving you kind of outlines of how we got where we're at, and trying to show you the intended meaning to language and events and how all these things work, and once again how the Matrix kind of routes all this information so people can know what the truth is. They can't say it, but you know what I mean. So I'm here to say it. Um, there's also stuff, remote neural monitoring, which is pretty much what it sounds like. Goes into what I'm saying with the synthetic telepathy. There's V2K, which there's not too much like stuff that can say it's concretely real. Obviously, with all the information I'm saying, it's probably real. I've seen people in an Adult Swim show kind of talk about it. I forget what the show was about. Something Dream Schematics or something like that. Something like that. But you know, making jokes about it and stuff like that. And V2K is stands for voice to control. Um, and that's basically giving verbal commands through either your ear canal or directly to your brain. Once again, scary stuff. If that doesn't scare you, don't know what to tell you. And once again, all this stuff, you know, goes into with the spies and all this stuff, and basically how everybody, you know, even on YouTube, like pretty much anyone you see on a screen, anyone who you hear as a talking head, um, they're camouflaging what's really going on. They're directing you in certain ways, and even if they're saying they're real truth or something, you know, they're still kind of misleading people or leading people in a certain way, and they're not saying what they really want to say. You know what I mean? And everything is organized beyond recognition. So, like I said in the previous part of the series, like they create all these sides, you know, and so you're supposed to be like, you know, angry or divided. You know, it's a whole order out of chaos and divide and conquer. And you would have thought that would be long gone. And that's how they took over the world, you know, and that's how they still maintain control. And that's what I'd like us to break down, you know, because that's not how we should be living. There should be ethical neural laws and all this stuff when brought to light. I really hope that the Geneva Convention starts to go after these people and you know start to say, you know, what are you doing to humanity? And just because we can do something doesn't mean we should do something. And say that with the atomic bomb. Obviously, if you research and look into what those people said, um, they were not happy with what they did, but some of them agree with it, some of it don't. Um, but I personally don't think, you know, you have soldiers to fight wars, right? And they want to fight, you know, as long as you have people that want to fight other people that want to fight other people, you know, you can continue doing stuff like that. And, you know, I cannot think of anything that would justify killing innocent civilians and dropping those atomic bombs. And I know the war could have been won anyway. And you think that the Nazis were the main component, and yet we dropped the atomic bomb on Japan. Once again, I'm just mentioning these things so you think a little bit more on why and how they happen and what motivates these actions and why they do things. There's always a reason for it. There's not coincidence. There's not too much coincidence left living in this digital matrix. So going on a few more sonic weapons, they have LRAD, which is long range acoustic devices. They pretty much, you know, they've made this kind of known, and you can look up all the different types of direct energy weapons and all these type of things. I have tons of information on it, but I'm trying to stick to the basics. But basically, so they use this for crowd dispersion at protests, but it's similar to many different variations of weapons I've been hit with, and they hurt. They really do hurt. And when you know that your body is basically being put into a microwave, um, I can't tell you what it's like to live with years of torture like that, knowing that, and knowing that your insides are filled with radiation or filled with basically like your organs are being burned, you know, and they can penetrate the skin. You know, look at my face, it's pretty red. I don't know how much that goes into the chemicals that I've been exposed to or the microwaves. I've had different variations of things going on. I've had remote lobotomies. I don't think you can see the one they did the other day. Literally just did one a couple days ago. It's been a while since I did one. I've also had like electroshocks, which there's tons of technology with that on how they can stimulate parts of the brain to repair, fix it, or create devastation. So, um, anyway, so let me see if there's any. There's also brain computer interfaces, which is basically what that sounds like too, interpreting brain signals and translating them into commands which go to computers, software, AI, and digital devices. So, like I said, all the information is there if you go to look, and that's, like I said, as being kind of like source code to kind of laser in, and that is kind of how I've been programmed to laser in on what I'm analyzing so that I can deliver it to you exactly as such. um, so all the pieces are there, and when you put them together as I am, I hope more people are concerned to do something about this or to speak up. As we're moving on, um, and just to talk about mentally ill, 25% are reported as mental illness, to have mental illness of some sort. And the reality is probably at least half the population has stuff, and they don't really deal with it, of course. And who wants to go into, the mental health industry or institutions that do that, knowing, like I said, that you're basically a test subject. And, I've been tortured in hospitals, microwaved in hospitals, microwaved and gassed in mental hospitals. You know what I mean? So, I understand why half those people who know stuff, they just keep their mouth shut and they're like, I'm fine, I'll figure it out myself. You know what I mean? I wish I never spoke to any therapist about the torture or the government stuff or whatever. And they, once again, have safeguards where you say anything, and you go into a mental hospital. You know what I mean? That's pretty much how it goes. Um, and it took 5 years about to break me and to get me to go into a mental hospital and talk to therapists and all this stuff and all that. So you live and you learn, but you would think that the hospitals and mental hospitals are here to protect you. And once again, I've been tortured by nurses and doctors and the receptions at hospitals, and basically they use this sub language. They use the information about spying on my thoughts and my everyday activities, what triggers me, and all that. And they use specific language that interacts with my subconscious, or they're, directly part of the psyop with this hive mind technology, and they're literally in my brain. And like I said, I can't speak to what the actual hive mind is, or if everyone's in a hive mind, and I'm finally, like the first one to say something about it. But in the position I'm in, how else could I, how could I not? So it could be everybody, could be just when psychops are happening, could be used in different ways. Only prisoners are put in this kind of mental thing where you're kind of jacked into the matrix or wired in the matrix, like I said. And that's how your brain interacts with the TV, which, like I said, like you could watch something that's violent, someone gets stabbed, I feel a pain. It's not like I got stabbed, but it's similar enough where you have this physical pain. And same thing with audio signals and stuff like that. I've had my own thoughts trigger parts of my body, and once again, that's scary as hell. You know what I mean? Scary as hell. Um, just finishing up this stuff. They had, I think it was in Russia. They had something called the Leda machine in the 1970s that would alter the mind, and how it affects the thinking of an individual with light and sound patterns. So once again, kind of going off what I said, it's not just like visual. A lot of it is through the ear, and that's not just sending commands or rewiring neurons and synapses before they happen, so and you can predict. And once again, you have these algorithms and these AIs that know how to torture me, and over time, it just keeps getting more and more information, so it can better predict what I'm going to think. It can better predict what my subconscious is going to do, and then basically, you're fucked. So, I will swear for that because that stuff. Um, So then there's also something called RHIC, RIC, and that's radio hypnotic intracerebral control. Once again, pretty much like it says. But like I said, I'm just giving you the information so you can go look it up for yourself, so you can know that, I've mentioned a lot of stuff. This is all real stuff now, and yet it's not talked about even close. So, and once again, with how they've tortured me, um, there's a lot of these biolabs and the fusion centers, all these crazy things collecting data. Um, you think about how they, I'm not saying that Wuhan, China, that's where the COVID virus came out or whatever. But I mean, there was a lab in Wuhan, and once again, you can read between the lines. I'm not going to touch the pandemic, or if there was some collaboration between the countries to make this happen and start killing off people. They have the heart machine. I'm not going to say that tsunamis on the eastern part of the world were created by the heart machine, but I'm just saying them to make you think, what if, what would stop them? Nothing. You know what I mean? But yeah, so these biolabs basically create DNA based chemical agents that can affect one individual alone, even in a crowded or enclosed area. And I've been with my family. I've interacted with other people in public places, and like I said, I was in mental hospitals where these agents happen. And I would have a roommate in my room, and I would be coughing and gasping for air, and yet the other person in my room is absolutely fine. And other people have talked about these type of chemical agents. And so basically, you could be on an airplane or an enclosed space like a bus or anything like that in a public area, and it's I've lived it. You know what I mean? Literally, I'm coughing. I'm having all these awful reactions. They poisoned my cigarettes for 3 years, which was something they kind of perfected back in World War II. They used to give poison cigarettes to the enemy, and wipe them out that way. I've had I don't even know how many different types of poisons in my cigarettes, and because I was tortured so badly, I did smoke them for about 3 years. You know what I mean? Can't imagine. And you want to say, like, I know that a good portion of people local to me, a lot of these people doing the convenience stores or the gas stations, like I know for a fact that a good portion of them were ex-military. And like I'll say, when you're in the CIA or a government agency or the military, you're never ex anything. You are that for the rest of your life. And with this psych op stuff, I'm pretty sure, but seeing how we get people to do stuff and going into the concept of serialization of food and any products you touch, any products that I touch to test individual or test different chemicals or anything like that. You got to think how these cigarettes or the food or any of this stuff, how is it straight from the factory at Marlboro, and they have these poison cigarettes, and they are collaborating with these labs, and they're like, all right, here's all the cigarettes are going to go to me. And literally, there was a couple times I drove 45 minutes out, I drove a couple hours out just trying to get cigarettes just to see how far these psych ops go. And I'm telling you, um, yeah, they all gave me poison cigarettes. So that's everyone at those convenience stores. So you wonder again, is it the people working there? Is it the convenience store themselves? Is it the chain? If it's like a Shell gas station, or it's like trying to think of the chain stores for that sell cigarettes, but basically any of that, the 7-Eleven. There you go. Is it the people who own 7-Eleven? Do they collaborate with the government? Do they have a choice? Do these military ops kind of, coerce them and they have to, or can they not? I don't think at this point that they can refuse, but, you know, I don't know. But basically, that's how they carry out a hidden Holocaust. So I go back to those numbers where you have 3 million people die every year, and you got to wonder how much of them are accidents, how much of them are these studies in torturing and guinea pigs and people being microwaved until they die. This could be, like I said, I am one of the most targeted people probably in the fucking world. Sorry for swearing, but like that's the truth. Um, and you know, um, lost my train of thought. So, they can have people die over the course of decades. They can kill them quickly in a year. They can make someone kill themselves or kill somebody else in a year. And like I said, they've groomed me to take this torture, and they've groomed me to take all this awful kind of stuff and the anger that's associated. And like I said, they rewire my brain. So then I'm groomed to just accept the torture as it gets and escalates more and more and more. And once again, people, like, I know they want this to get out, so they want me to say these kind of things so that people know that's what they do to people, and we get stronger, we get better, we get faster, but at some point you got to ask again, is there a point to this? Should we be doing this stuff? And no, we shouldn't. So continuing off that, you think of how many cover-ups there are, and like I told you, the treatment I got in hospitals, and then you get groomed to just take the subliminal torture, all the anger you have before you get there. It goes into this other theory, basically, that comes with like the thing I was talking about, the concept of being dead or being in the afterlife, being a guardian or guardian angel, and however that is conceptualized in other parts of the world. But basically, they try to get you to be clear, which is a Scientology kind of thing, if you know about that, and all the awful stuff that goes into that. That kind of goes into the concept of what is known as gang stalking. Basically, if someone left Scientology, they would, they know Scientology. Jeez. Scientology, basically, they have these steps. You can look at Going Clear. There was a Louis Theroux documentary where it's basically like showing the process of how they get people to, where they, get people to be higher up in Scientology and stuff. And basically, it has all you give them this personal information, all your flaws, and there are literally steps in the program where people are yelling in your face all these grievances they have with you, or attacking your personal character, and so that kind of stuff is always going on with that. And of course, they have the best lawyers in the world, but there definitely is a connection with that Scientology, and like I said, government agencies and this programming, and L. Ron Hubbard. They probably had close ties with the government. Going in the military, all that stuff. Once again, everything is connected. Everything converges at some point. We're at that point right now. But so if someone leaves Scientology, they attack you with this gang stalking concept, which is now how they do psych ops. And they attack you in your mind. They attack you spiritually. They attack you by saying personal stuff you were just doing that day, or they attack you by bringing up stuff that's personal to you from 10 years ago, 5 years ago, what you were doing a couple months ago, what your dreams are, what you're thinking about doing, what you have like reservations about, or what you're scared of, or anything like that. And these people will literally walk by you and say these things. And obviously, once again, if you say this, you'll look crazy. And just to add a little thing about the mental health institutes and all that stuff, they literally have like questions where it says, do you think your thoughts are being broadcast, and do you think people can read your mind? And it's like 100% yes, they can. But the fact that those questions are in there is to the people who fall through, or who don't fall through the cracks or whatever, or maybe they do. Like, this is a way to kind of weed out people who know what's going on, but they're not a part of it. And so rather than letting them in on it, having a 5-minute conversation with any government agents that's like, yes, this is happening, shut your mouth. They just torture the hell out of you or use you as an experimental person. I don't know how many people are like me and find out what's going on and they're like, oh, I get it. Or, like, once again, like, took 5 years to get it out of me, and then you're in the system, and that makes you more of a target, right? And I've said what was happening to me in the past, and that got me more tortured and more attacks. And then the YouTube algorithm literally is going into the same wiring within this matrix. So everything you look at is then related to your thoughts, related to what you're going through, and all your mental illness issues and what triggers you. And that's why I'm saying this technology is dangerous. It should not exist. And if we're going to build people up to be better, I can tell you, I lived this for 8 years. I have had nothing but negative reinforcement, never positive reinforcement once. Like I said, I had a forced Kundalini awakening, had my third eye opened, and then I was given all this knowledge. And it was only my willpower and my love and my light that has kept me alive. You know what I mean? And I know lots of people have the same type of story, just not to the extreme level that I have. And of course, because I want to say this and I want to free people, you know what I mean? I want people to be out of their chains and not say, hey, I saved myself. Meanwhile, you saved yourself from not dying. And, how much of your voice, your individuality do you have? How much of your spirit and soul gets to come out? And even if you're making art, how much of that is truly your true message? And yeah, so that whole gang stalking thing goes into the psyops and connected to Scientology and all that kind of stuff. Um, and I think that will pretty much do do what we wanted for part two. You know what I mean? So thanks for listening and watching. Please look up and research all this stuff. This is the real deal. And if everybody knows, then the message is we got to fight back. We got to disobey these orders. We have to fight for our freedom, freedom of expression, and for our piece of the pie, which is not just, have your pie and eat it too, and to do evil things and awful things and say, hey, that's the way it is. Some of these things can be reversed, they can be altered, they can be changed. And the more people that say something about it, then the more we can get our freedom back and finally unchain ourselves from government, from these gatekeepers, from each other in the self-policing community. I mean, we talk about all this other stuff. It's like Neighborhood Watch, definitely connected to this, I'm going to guess. You know what I mean? And that doesn't go into what I experienced with my neighbors and how this coordinates, and the fact that after this happened to me, that ex-military people moved in pretty close in proximity to me. And you know what I mean? I have to live with this and know that this is, literally the people around me are doing this to me. And once again, I say, going back to what should really matter is love thy neighbor. You know what I mean? And all that kind of stuff. You don't leave anyone behind. You take care of everyone. And once again, like, if we were living in a world of more divinity, in a world of more pure light, I think we would, you know, not be afraid to die for our causes, and to stand up to tyranny, and to stand up for, other things that are hijacked, like I said before, feminism, civil rights, the social climate and how it changed in 2012 and 2016. A lot of these people, and once again, I'm sure they went more after, I would have been stuck in whatever position because of just who I am. And the fact that I have this stuff where I want to break down the walls of the politics and show, liberals what's really going on, and how a lot of them do know, and all the talking heads, like I said, anyone you see or hear as part of this. I want to give liberals their voice back. I want to give Republicans back their country and their culture that they had, and that should both be in the mainstream. And I find a lot of television pretty unwatchable. They have all these shows like, the Zombie Academy, or Vampire Academy, or Vampire Wars, or Ghost Academy, or all these things that, once again, are all about programming. The plot is gone. The reality is gone, and we have replaced it just with whatever we need to program people, and program them to these liberal politics. And if you know that these liberal politics are not even helping the people that they say they're helping, and once again, just to show a little the hypocrisy, we've been putting black people up since the 1970s. I saw, like maybe a third of like the big shows in the 70s were all with black actors. And I'm not saying, we have a long way to go with a lot of stuff. I'm not trying to go any further than that, just to open your eyes into what you should really be fighting for. But we're still, we had escalated people and triggered people to language so much, with the liberals and all that, where you have the trigger warnings and all this stuff where they're hypersensitized hypersensitive. Can't say it, but you know what I'm saying. Um, to the language, and this is all done subconsciously. And once again, you don't know if people are programmed to be this way, so they act out, or they're programmed and they're so traumatized that that's where this anger comes from. And I'm behind you, 110%. You know what I mean? Um, and so you wonder who's prisoner, who's not a prisoner, um, who is held captive from whatever aspects of life that can be used to torture you. But yeah, just to end that other part, it's like you think about all this other stuff, and it's like, why is Spanish culture, the Spanish population has doubled in the past decade, literally doubled. And a lot of that's Mexicans, but just, Spanish, anything from South America and all that. Like I said, I wish I could speak more about the awful things that are going on there, whether it's Venezuela or any of the other countries, um, but Spanish population doubled, and so we don't see their culture. We don't see them being lifted up. Like I said, Jewish people have been around since pretty much the inception of this country. We don't see them being lifted up as far as their culture and their values. And I forget the name of the show, but they had like this show that was just like run of the mill sitcom with African people, and it doesn't get into their culture, and you wonder why, in a country of a melting pot, why we don't have shows that deal with their lives and what actually is their culture, just to give like stereotype stuff, you know what I mean. Once again, stereotypes are based on 5% to maybe 20% of whatever, in every race, any type of person, any person who walks a certain path of life, 5 to 20% are not great people, or they're not a great example of humanity, and so they're used to create divisive things, you know what I mean. And once again, we're still hiding what their actual culture is, you know what I mean. And then we say, hey, we want to lift up all minorities, and it's like, well, these people have to wait until we're ready, how many gay people did we let die and just basically be guinea pigs for HIV? I mean, yeah, we got a cure now, but people probably knew what was happening in the 80s. Hey, just let all these gay people die, right? You know what I mean? And meanwhile, it was just means to an end so they can do their narrative. But we could have helped gay people way before. And as I said, with black people, with the Masonic lodges, it took 100 years to free, people from plantations. Once again, I'm just trying to say these things so you start to think, and so you start to disobey and resist in a way that matters, so that it is seen in the light of day. And like I say with Republicans too, we should have a smaller government. I agree with that. I agree with a lot of the other things. Everybody has to take in the politics, take in the philosophies. I mean, our country, our flag used to mean something, but then they started to say, hey, it's supposed to mean everything and anything people want it to mean. And of course that's true, and that's the beauty of it, and that should be the beauty of America. But we've lost that, and all these things that were about country, and or you go into the working man, all these things are forgotten, you know what I mean. And I just want everyone, and they say pride is a um kind of low vibrational thing, which once again, since 2012 and 2016, we've used this science and this spirituality to create this new thing in the matrix where we are literally eliminating low vibrational people, and we're getting rid of the negative stuff, and we're trashing it, cleaning up stuff. It ain't clean, it's not clear. We are literally suppressing people's views, suppressing their thoughts, their beliefs, their expression, you know what I mean? And we can say whatever we want about, using racial slurs. But when we go anything past that, and we start saying you can't laugh at these jokes, even though they make you laugh and make millions of people laugh because they're objectively funny, or, you're saying certain things just based on your opinion. Not everybody is, this soundbite kind of clipped information where it's just like, oh, like they say everything right all the time. No, we're people, and we mess up, and we have prejudices. I don't, we might be able to get rid of racism at some point. I don't think we'll ever be able to get rid of prejudice, and people can't be correct all the time, and they don't know how to say stuff all the time. and we can't mark them as an enemy or a combatant or a racist or a Nazi or whatever, and especially how ironic it is that that's what the climate is. And like, I don't really want to go into politics, but I'm just saying, you know, yeah, there's a line where we start using all these words and the language gets all shifted about. We are all in a Nazi esque surveillance state. We are all watched 100% of the time. We literally got this from the Nazis, and America is the world control, and we controlled this with stuff the Nazis were doing. So, you know what I mean? That's why I know what type of society we're living in and what we're suppressing. And so that's going to conclude my part two. Love and light forever, and take care.